All right, I think we'll get started. All right, welcome to our final town hall of the year. Thank you to all of you for tuning in once again. Today we're going to be talking about caregiving, and we're joined today by our special guest presenter, Theresa Wilbanks. Thank you for joining us. Theresa is a writer, speaker, podcast host, certified caregiving consultant, and founder of Sustainable Caregiving. She's the author of Navigating the Caregiver River, A Journey to Sustainable Caregiving. You can also check out her podcast series, Self-Caregiving Strategies, in which she explores her 12 sustainable caregiving strategies. That podcast and a whole lot more is available on her website, sustainablecaregiving.com. There's some really great resources on there, so I would encourage you all to please go check that out. After the presentation, we're going to open it up for questions. It's maybe easiest just to use the raise hand feature at the bottom of your screens, and we'll try to call on you in the order that you raise your hands. You can also use the Q&A feature and type your questions in, and we'll try to get to those in the order that you put those up there as well. So without further ado, I will turn it over to today's speaker, Theresa Wilbanks. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian. I'm going to share my screen. I really appreciate being with you all here today, especially this holiday month. So as Brian said, I founded Sustainable Caregiving, and this was when I was caring for my dad, and I cared for him for 7 years. Actually, I was co-caregiver with my husband, Joe. And the sustainable caregiving strategies were inspired by Dad, who was a remarkable man, and he was also a remarkably stubborn man. And he really challenged me to my core. So my work centers on empowering family caregivers by sharing these strategies through presentations and workshops and through coaching. So we help Dad age in place per his wishes, but a caregiver is anyone who cares for or is concerned about an aging or an ill family member. And your family member might be in a care home, and they might be several states away, or they might be a country away, and you're helping out, or you're just checking in on them, or even just concerned about care, then that makes you a caregiver. It's also important to note that while Dad and I enjoyed a positive relationship through my youth and adult life, now I will say that the caregiving years were a bit rocky. That's not always the case, and we can be caring for a parent or a spouse who didn't treat us well. And that's a different dynamic than what I experienced, but the sustainable caregiving strategies that we'll talk about today can be helpful under those circumstances. So life is like a river, and sometimes it sweeps you gently along, and sometimes the rapids come out of nowhere. Now, the river is a great metaphor for life, and it also resonates with the experience of caregiving. You could imagine that your caregiving journey is like being in a raft on a river, and the river has calm sections and obstacles and rapids and a few waterfalls. And we often don't know what's around the next bend. And at times we feel like we've been tossed out of the raft and we're drowning. When we employ certain strategies to protect our well-being, manage the emotions and the stress, the river doesn't change, but how we navigate the river changes. We step into the flow. So I come from a family of caregivers. At 17, I gave up my bedroom for my mom's mom, who moved in with us. My parents took care of Dad's mom in their home until she was 101, I believe. And then when care became too physically demanding, she moved into a nursing home, and they visited every day. She passed at 104. But still, when I began caring for Dad, I had no idea what I was in for. And I became burned out, and I knew that I was not on a sustainable path. I was concerned about the effects of stress on my health. I also worried that I would have significant regret about my relationship with Dad. It was a relationship that was rapidly deteriorating. And I really wanted to understand why this role was so challenging. And did the caregiver gene skip me? And as I delved into the whys, it became clear that it was just hard. And my folks shielded me from that reality. And the need to understand why I was struggling led to lots of trial and error and tears. And at the end, these strategies that helped minimize the stress and ultimately improved my emotional and physical health. Now, this path that I was on to a more sustainable experience led to a more meaningful journey. And these strategies allowed me to flip the script from I have to be a caregiver to I get to be a caregiver. And with these strategies, in addition to my health improving, my relationship with Dad improved significantly. And this is what led me to found Sustainable Caregiving and help caregivers just prepare for and navigate the caregiving journey. And this is a photo of Joe, Dad, and I celebrating Dad's 98th birthday. So Lena Horne said, it's not the load that breaks you down, it's the way you carry it. And employing strategies, reimagining self-care, and creating a new network of support helps us carry our caregiving load in a way that is sustainable so that we can prioritize our well-being while caring for our family member, which is not an easy feat. So the sustainable caregiving strategies that we will discuss today are self-care practices, but unlike many self-care activities that we will also discuss, sustainable caregiving strategies take practice, trial and error, and there can be a learning curve before they begin to adequately support us. So these strategies help us prevent and recover from burnout, reclaim control of what can feel like chaos, and manage the emotions. When we're caring for a family member, the emotions and the trifecta, the guilt, anger, and resentment swirl, and the cyclone is fueled by fear. Now, emotions are neither positive nor negative, but when we hold on to an emotion or it has a hold on us, it can be destructive. So anger can be positive. It can signal that a boundary was crossed. Resentment can inform us when we may be allowing ourselves to be taken advantage of. And anxiety can motivate us to take action when we or a loved one is in danger. But when we become consumed by anger, resentment, and anxiety, it negatively affects our mental health. So with these strategies, we're essentially creating a new support system. When we think of a support system, we often think of people. And while people can be an essential part of our caregiver support system, we need a more varied and versatile system that doesn't solely rely on the physical and emotional availability of others. This is crucial because friends and family often distance from us when we embark on our care journey, and we can feel very alone and isolated. The new support system we create incorporates self-care activities and strategies and routines to prioritize our well-being. And we collect a few new travel companions who accompany us on our caregiving journey. So we'll talk more about the strategies, and you'll receive an overview handout and a link to a document that includes much more detail on all of these strategies. Now, this is an overview of the caregiving journey. In beginning the experience, we may see a care opportunity on the horizon, or we start helping with errands and tasks. When we're immersed, we can feel like we're drowning, we're overwhelmed and burned out. After some time, we begin navigating. And caregiving is still hard, but we're managing the challenges. Now, we know that there will be another crisis, but we will get through it. And then transitioning. So understanding the framework, the caregiver spectrum, and the phases of caregiving can help you identify where you are in your experience. This awareness will help you identify when you've transitioned to a new phase and help you recognize how the strategies can best serve you. We can be in two places at one time. For example, we might be caring for one family member and anticipating caring for another family member in the future. The phases are not linear, so caregivers can get tossed out of the raft before they even realize they're on the caregiver river, and their journey begins with immersion. After the crisis is over, we might go back to waiting and continue managing well for a while. Ultimately, though, the caregiving experience continues to intensify. So let's take a closer look at the first phase. So when we see a care opportunity on the horizon and are anticipating caring for a family member, the strategies that can help us include paying attention to physical self-care and staying healthy and fit. Caregiving is an expedition that requires stamina. And during this phase, when the waters are calm, we can learn how our emotional and physical well-being are connected so that we understand how to manage stress and support our mental and physical health. Practicing and cultivating mindfulness is crucial and possible at any point on our journey, but it's easier to develop the skill before we are immersed and overwhelmed. And the peace of mind that we cultivate through mindfulness practice will allow us to focus on the present rather than ruminate on the past or worry about the future, as we are understandably prone to do as caregivers. The awareness we develop through mindfulness can help us recognize when we are in emotional distress so that we can adjust our self-care practices. And awareness also teaches us how to read the water and look ahead for warning signs, which will help us resist denial. We can have conversations and begin to understand what our family members' plans are for the future and how we fit into those plans. So when we're wading into the experience, we're helping with errands and tasks, and we're often juggling priorities, but it feels good to be helping. Understanding and accepting our caregiver role is crucial at this point. And even more than accepting is embracing the caregiver role that empowers us. In part, that means acknowledging the wildness and accepting that there will be rapids and obstacles and waterfalls and unexpected turns. Embracing the role means acknowledging that we are exactly where we are supposed to be. In fact, it means loving where we are and not wanting to be anywhere else. Hearing that may be triggering. It was for me. But when I moved into this space of loving my fate, my experience was transformed. When we embrace this journey that we didn't plan, we take back control. Most of us didn't plan on being in a caregiving role. We might resist identifying with a title of caregiver. It's important to connect with the role so that we prepare, so that we're not caught off guard when we feel overwhelmed by the intense feelings that begin to surface. It's even more important to embrace the caregiver CEO role. If we recognize that we will be managing care rather than doing it all ourselves, we can prepare accordingly and avoid surpassing our limits. During this phase, we can have more detailed conversations and make plans. In caregiving, the worries are real and often become a reality. Worry causes stress. Empowered with a plan, we can set the worry aside. We can begin to think about limits and setting boundaries so that we have a plan in place when our limits are reached. So boundaries are the limits that protect our physical and emotional well-being. We can set boundaries with friends, with family members, with folks who are helping us care for our care recipient, and for anyone who impacts care provided. But the most important boundaries are the ones we set with ourselves around how much is too much help and how much is too much emotional investment into worry. We can use routines to prioritize caregiver well-being, and we'll talk more about routines in a bit. As we begin to care for a family member and priorities shift, it's not uncommon to give up our interests and hobbies bit by bit until our entire life revolves around caregiving, and we lose our connection to the things that make us feel more like ourselves. So what are your passions, and how can you reimagine those passions to connect with them in 5, 10, or 15-minute blocks of time? We can schedule and microdose these activities into our caregiving day. We can journal about how to lighten the caregiving load and how to stay connected with our passions. And the conflicts that arise. Caring for a family member is challenging. It's easy to get caught up in the disagreements and feel like we're in a competition with a winner and a loser. It was important for me to learn to let go of control, let go of outcomes, and to understand when winning was actually losing. Because the reality is that the tighter we hold on to control and outcomes, the more control we relinquish. And it's the letting go that gives us control. When we are immersed and drowning, we are burned out. We're beyond our limits. Burnout is caused by excessive and repeated stress. And when we're experiencing burnout, we're exhausted. We no longer feel that we have the ability to cope. We view responsibilities and interactions as increasingly more stressful and frustrating. A hospitalization or a disease diagnosis can drop us into the deep end in a minute. And we can also arrive slowly, that slippery slope into the flames of burnout. And you can think of burnout as a spectrum. And as caregivers, we can be anywhere on that spectrum at any given time based on what we're going through. What we need when we're drowning is a connection to support, emotional support, and the opportunity to vent. It's vital to establish routines that include self-care and breaks. Physical self-care, such as adequate sleep and nutrition and hydration, are essential. A connection to resources is crucial, and the list we get from the hospital when leaving with our family member is not adequate. Without instruction and support, the list can cause rather than reduce overwhelm, and there are no support resources for the caregiver well-being on the list. And as caregivers, we often need training. Many caregivers are acting in a certified nursing assistant role without the training, the certification, or the salary, or the support staff. And we need a crystal ball. In place of a crystal ball, research is needed just to better understand the future and create a plan. But we're too overwhelmed. So overwhelmed planning. And we need to receive help. But first, we may need to accept that we need help, and that can be a challenge. So accepting help is vital because we can do it all ourselves, but not without consequences. And doing it all ourselves will lead to burnout. And it's much easier to recover, to prevent rather than recover from burnout. So when we accept help, we gain time for ourselves so that we can focus on our well-being and self-care. Self-care looks different during caregiving. We may have only 5 or 15 minutes to devote to our well-being. So it's important to reimagine and microdose self-care throughout our day. And we need physical self-care, emotional, mental, and social self-care. We need practical self-care and spiritual self-care. So let's take a closer look at each of these. Physical self-care activities improve our physical state and consequently positively impact our minds. Without adequate attention to our bodies, our physical well-being, we may not have the energy or capacity to care for ourselves in a way that sustains us while we care for our family member. When we sleep well, our thinking is more precise. We're less susceptible to mental and physical illnesses. We can better tolerate incidents that cause frustration. It's important to eat regularly and with intention, choosing from healthy options so that our brains and bodies are fueled and functioning at optimum levels to make those difficult decisions. And staying adequately hydrated is equally important. When we're dehydrated, the levels of the stress hormone cortisol increase in our bodies. Staying well hydrated can reduce our stress levels. In addition to our mind being stressed, when we're dehydrated, our bodies are stressed and not properly supporting us. We need exercise or some type of movement. Movement supports our physical well-being by getting our blood flowing, delivering nutrients and oxygen to our organs, and removing built-up toxins. Regular exercise has proven to offer long-term anxiety prevention benefits. And then the wellness visits. It's important to schedule and attend annual wellness visits, the dentist appointments, mammograms, and other important sessions that help us remain healthy. To prevent or recover from burnout, we need emotional self-care. Now, emotional self-care involves reflecting and processing emotions. Awareness helps us identify our emotions, and practice allows us to lean into them and work through them so that the negative energy doesn't accumulate. We need to be able to vent without judgment. When emotions build, like in a pressure cooker, it's crucial to release the stress. Now, it's even better to relieve pressure before reaching the boiling point. Holding intense emotions inside keeps us in fight or flight mode. Sharing or venting is a release. It's an act of self-care that makes you feel lighter and less burdened. But the key is to find the right listener, someone who gets it, so that we don't suffer from what Brené Brown calls a vulnerability hangover. Journaling thoughts and exploring them with curiosity and objectivity is a form of venting and can be very therapeutic. And we need compassion. We need self-compassion. What we're going through is hard, and we can be so hard on ourselves. Our capacity for compassion gets depleted, and I call this our compassion reserves. So when our compassion reserves are depleted, we're more easily overwhelmed and more quickly irritated because our coping mechanisms are no longer effective, and our energy continues to get depleted. And we have trouble sleeping, which adds to the negative cycle. Empathy drains us even further, and we no longer feel compassion for our care recipient, friends, family, strangers, or even ourselves. Love feels elusive. So reconnecting with our compassion can be like putting on new glasses with the new prescription. Instead of seeing things clearly again, we feel things clearly again. And we reconnect with our compassion through self-care. So other emotional self-care activities include setting boundaries, using affirmations or mantras, or engaging in counseling or therapy. Expressing our creativity through art or cooking or listening to music or knitting. These are each emotional self-care activities that help us relax, flow from the present moment, tune out our worries, and tune into ourselves. So mental self-care involves engaging the brain and stimulating the mind. Now, mental self-care is crucial because learning and challenging our minds allows us to experience growth and feel relevant rather than stagnant, which is how we might feel. We might feel stuck in our caregiver role. And when we feed our curiosity by learning something new or solving a problem, we feel a sense of accomplishment. Our self-confidence gets a boost. So examples of mental self-care include learning a new language, reading, playing an instrument, playing games, listening to a podcast, teaching a new skill, and solving puzzles. Social self-care involve events that help us connect with people to develop and deepen relationships, which can be in rare supply if friends and family abandoned ship as you became more immersed in caregiving. So activities that cultivate feelings of love, gratitude, and connection enrich our well-being. Social self-care is also vital because as social beings, we need connections to thrive. So connecting with fellow caregivers in a support group is a great way to receive and offer help. Our sense of belonging is strengthened, and in turn, strengthens our feelings of self-worth. Other activities that help us nurture relationships also include sharing coffee with friends, cuddling with a fur baby, an act of kindness, talking on the phone, or having lunch with a sibling. So practical self-care involves the work we do to prepare for upcoming events. When we develop a new system or a strategy, we set ourselves up for future success and less stress. When we create a routine, we organize our day to accomplish our priorities. An organized space facilitates completing tasks efficiently and with less aggravation. Accepting help is practical self-care. It's important to determine, define, and communicate our physical and emotional limits before we reach them so that we can make a plan for when those limits are reached. So prioritizing our well-being can seem impossible, and setting boundaries can feel selfish, the guilt. And then when we finally accept that we need help, our care recipient resists outside help. So if this is the case for you, try this. Share with them that while they do not need help, you do. And if their resistance persists, it's often overcome when the right match is found. And you can think of it as match.com for the three of you, because you will also be frequently interacting with the folks who are helping your family member. So if your family member likes to chat, a chatty aide will be welcome versus if they prefer quiet. And what hobbies does or did your family member enjoy? Finding an aide who shares their interests can be a game changer. Practical self-care activities also include getting finances organized, researching a worry and making a plan, organizing a closet or a living space, meal planning, or learning about an aspect of your family member's medical situation and preparing for the future. Spiritual self-care involves connecting with and caring for our inner self. So this connection grounds us because our true self is not aligned with ego or fear. A spiritual self-care practice helps us cope, and it leads to understanding and growth so that we can rely on our internal GPS for direction. It may be that our spiritual practice is to spend time in nature. As Albert Einstein said, look deep into nature and then you will understand everything better. If our belief system includes prayer, prayer becomes a key component and an activity to prioritize. Now, our spiritual self-care practice might be devoting moments to meditation. Now, meditation is a powerful practice that cultivates peace by unburdening our minds. Caregiving is a trigger minefield, and mindfulness can help disarm the minds by helping us pause and take time to act with intention rather than react. The more time we spend nurturing our inner self, the more our intuition will guide it. So take time to unplug from technology and link to your internal wiring. Spiritual self-care activities also include yoga practice, volunteering, creating a vision board, or just taking time for stillness and reflection. So after a few years, we begin navigating, and that means our strategies are working. Resentment may be lingering. We're managing well. We still may be frustrated with the folks, friends, and family members who are not showing up in a helpful way. And our future may be fuzzy. We may have put off planning our future because we're so caught up in managing our present, or we may feel shame when we think about our future because it means our family member will no longer be with us. It's important to plan for our future after caregiving. It's also essential to continue to establish and modify routines as needed so that we prioritize our well-being. Obstacles are a constant on our caregiving journey, and with intention, we can transform the obstacles to work for us rather than against us. So let's take a closer look at routines, forgiveness, and obstacles. And first, routines. So a routine organizes tasks and responsibilities and activities. And as our caregiving experience intensifies, developing and adhering to routines becomes increasingly more crucial. Because as we said, effective routines are the key to prioritizing our well-being while caring for our family member. Routines are important because they help reduce stress. Routines empower us. We get out of reaction mode and use our time and energy with intention. This frees up both our time and headspace. We can schedule and prioritize self-care activities that restore our energy and our peace of mind. And when plans go off the rails, as they do, we can respond by modifying rather than discarding the routine so that our self-care does not get derailed. When our day feels chaotic, we're just trying to stay afloat and we're in survival mode. We can also be so physically drained and emotionally low on love that self-care efforts drain us even further. Trial and error lead us to our tried and tested self-care solutions and routines, which takes time. But the alternative is to locate a solution each time we feel challenged, lack confidence, or are faced with a conflict. When we work through the trial and error to arrive at the routines and the strategies and the activities that support us, we don't have to figure out what we need while we're under duress. Because under duress, the effort required to respond each time we're knocked off balance is immense. And when our energy is already spent, it's too easy to reach for a quick fix. And a quick fix ultimately will add to our feelings of being out of control. So next, let's look at forgiveness. When we forgive, we stop feeling angry or resentful towards someone for fill in the blank. We could say an offense or a mistake. And as caregivers, we often have a legitimate list of people and events and systems and services that have failed us. It's possible to spend an enormous amount of time and energy on anger and resentment, which is why it's essential to deal with the lingering resentment and to forgive others and ourselves. So resentment means to feel again, and resentment is replaying or reliving something that made us angry. Something made you angry and you felt it was unfair and it needed to change. And over time, it didn't change and the anger turned hard. So anger is something is going on that is unfair and it needs to change. Resentment is nothing is going to change and it's affecting my mental health. Resentment is an addictive state of mind and it's toxic and it only hurts ourselves. Resentment saps our energy and clouds our perceptions and our perspective. Resentment only gives us the illusion of control, and we hold on to resentment because we want a different outcome. And if we let go of the possibility that we will experience that desired outcome. The tighter we hold on, the more control we relinquish because the more invested we are in this illusion of control. It is the letting go that gives us control. Forgiving is no longer being defined by the wrongs committed. Forgiving is setting a limit, a boundary, around how much we will continue to be emotionally invested in the hurt and harm because we dwell on the wrong. Forgiving and releasing the anger and resentment isn't a gift to the one who is forgiven. It's the gift we give ourselves. And it's important to talk about obstacles in caregiving because obstacles are everywhere. We encounter obstacles within the systems. Our friends and family can present obstacles. Even our care recipient can feel like an obstacle. When we're navigating, we can use these obstacles to our advantage, take back our power, and like a river, carve a new path. Overcoming obstacles is empowering, transforming them is next level. But it's not that easy. We resist leaning into obstacles because obstacles make us emotional. Emotions cloud our thinking and our clear view of the obstacle. Emotions magnify the obstacle's power, and in doing so, can minimize our power. When we're pressured to make a decision and we're overwhelmed, we aren't able to think clearly. We may feel paralyzed. And when this happens over and over again, we lose our resilience and we lose our ability to respond rather than react. We lose a strength that helps us take a step back to take the extra steps needed to figure out how to overcome the obstacle and how to find the shiny gift hidden within. So accepting and leaning into our reality can help us flip the obstacle so that it works for us rather than against us. It is a puzzle to solve and a process to work through. And when we ask ourselves, how might I use this situation to work to my advantage? We begin to examine the obstacle with a different lens. And changing our perspective with this new lens is how we take back our power and take the steps that help us reach the next level. A new perspective will not make caregiving easier. However, aspects of caregiving will be easier to accept when we discover the gift obscured by the obstacle and we use it as an opportunity for growth or discovery. We can learn to struggle well and shift quickly from a perceived challenge to what's next. And growth will come not despite the obstacle, but because of it. The gift may be that you're able to improve your situation, find a better path forward for the future, develop a new skill set, cultivate resilience, or pass along information to help another family caregiver. So our next phase is when our family member is transitioning and our role is transitioning. And we've cared for our family member and worked so hard to help them stay healthy and frankly, to keep them alive. And it can be hard to stop doing and just be with them, which is what is needed at this point. Our self-care strategies are vital during this time. And then drifting. It may be 2 years since a family member has passed and we've lost our purpose and we're struggling to find our way forward. It's important to reconnect with our passions that we had prior to caregiving. It may be hard to remember what they were. We've lost our purpose, and our strategies are critical to our well-being and will serve us well as we transition to a life that doesn't revolve around our family member and care responsibilities. Small steps are the key here to moving forward. And please check in with anyone who has lost their care recipient. We often don't realize the depth of their struggle. So the strategies work together to support you, your situation, and each other. And you will receive a handout with the 12 sustainable caregiving strategies and a link to a free special edition PDF that covers each of these strategies in detail, because I know we covered a lot very quickly. And as Brian said, my book, Navigating the Caregiver River, A Journey to Sustainable Caregiving, is available on Amazon. And the Self-Caregiving Strategies podcast is also a resource that explores the 12 sustainable caregiving strategies. So we're going to switch over to questions, and I'd love to hear your comments and questions. You are all experts in your caregiving experience and can help others with your insights. So please weigh in when you have a helpful answer as well.
Okay, thank you very much. That's great talk. Let's just go ahead and get into questions. I see Carla has her hand raised. Carla, I'm going to take you off mute. Carla, are you there?
Had a different
There we go. Yep. Go ahead.
Looks like she's still on mute.
All right, well, sorry, folks, give me 1 second here. Ask her to unmute.
No, I don't have a question.
Oh, okay.
I don't know how my hand got raised.
That's all right. No problem.
Glad you're here, Carla.
All right, like I said before, if you do have a question, you can hit that raise hand feature. Also, you can hit there's a little Q&A button at the bottom of the screen, so feel free to type your questions in there as well.
Okay, I will ask a question.
Okay, great. Go ahead.
I guess my issue or question would be helping me determine when I need caregiving.
Yes. And yeah, so as everyday activities they can become more challenging, and you recognize that, it might start with, maybe driving. If you recognize that you don't feel as safe or comfortable driving, and you think about what it would mean if you were no longer driving, then you might need help with tasks or errands at that point, help getting to the grocery store. So I think it's looking forward at any challenges that you're facing now and think about what that might look like down the road. You might think about your home environment, and is it set up for you if you were to have more physical challenges down the road? Do you have stairs that you might not be able to navigate? So it really is a matter of, if right now you're not receiving help, is kind of thinking about the future, and as you begin to be challenged more, what that might look like. And then you can look at who would be the folks who can help you. Do you have family members who live close by? And so that's not always the answer. It's good to have the conversations with them to find out, what care might look like and what their involvement and help might look like. Contacting the local area agency on aging and finding out what resources are available in your community is a great place to start as well. So does that help, Carla?
Somewhat, yeah. I mean, I've already told the kids to pull my keys when it's time to pull my keys, even if I don't make a good decision about that myself. They just have to do it.
Mhm.
And the care for the house, I kind of am handling not very well, but I don't care either is probably part of the problem, but I never have cared. My
Mhm.
parents would be having a fit if they could see how I live, but that's all right. They're long gone. And in terms of getting to transportation, I do know the resources that are available, and I would have to be picked up on my dirt hillside in my power chair, which I can all manage right now. And I know what is available, but I also don't want to move somewhere else. I'm very clear about that. And I've discussed that thoroughly with the kids, but it's stuff like that you kind of go, somebody could cook for me and I
Yeah.
probably couldn't eat the food that they give me because of the diet that I have. So,
Mm.
I don't want to be the big whiner patient, but those are just thoughts that I've had.
No, they're very real concerns. I think you're right. To have someone come in and cook and then, you not be able to eat the food. And that's why, it is important to find someone who's going to provide the help that you need, help that's helpful. And, you can start to think about if you had, for example, there are home care agencies that have aides who can come in. They do light housekeeping.
Right.
They can run errands. They can, you could consider grocery delivery. And some might cook. And again, that would be very important to make sure that they understood what you would, what you're able to eat, what you want to eat, and just find a good match in that way. And letting them take over some of these tasks and responsibilities is a great way to start. And it also, it's a good place to start having a conversation with your kids. They might want to step in and help in some of these areas. They might not be able to, but to start to look at these things and have conversations, and also consider that like an environment that's cleaned up is possibly safer for you. And they can help make sure that the food in the refrigerator is, no expired foods in there. And again, it keeps you safe. So it's not just, to keep the environment clean and comfortable. There's also a safety concern there. So I think it sounds like it's a really great time to start having conversations with your family members and locating those resources. Local area agency on aging sometimes can provide financial support as well to have those aides come in and help. That they helped us with Dad. There was financial support. We could choose our own agency and our own match that worked well after a lot of trial and error. When we found the right folks who came in, Dad looked forward. They became part of his social circle. He'd ask when they're coming next, and he was very resistant in the future. He didn't want anybody else in the home. He would let me do all of it. Eventually we had 3 ladies who would come in and alternate, and they became like part of the family. So, that's just something to consider for down the road.
Yeah, my house is safe. But it just doesn't look as well kept as some people would think it needs to be. But there is a sign on the door that something about a well-kept house is a sign of a dull mind. So
I love that. I love that.
that's it.
Yeah, no, great question.
Thank you, Carla.
Yeah.
I see we have a question in the chat here. Alice asks, writes, I'm not a caregiver, but my sister is for her husband who has dementia. They live far away, so our contact is mostly phone and email, plus twice yearly visits of about a week. How can I best support her?
Oh, I love that question that you're thinking about your sister who's a caregiver and how you can support her. And, the number one thing, certainly when you visit, there's some things we can talk about, but just being someone who she can talk to and vent to and share with. It's so rare that as a caregiver, we have someone who listens to us without judgment. If someone hasn't been a caregiver, they often don't understand the feelings, the emotions that we have. And then when we share them, we feel guilt and shame because of the reaction and the response that we get. So just being there for her, and you might even set up a weekly call, make it something regular. Like we said, it's easier to, it's better to release the pressure before it builds. And if there's like a scheduled time where you all can talk and she can just share what's going on, or maybe she doesn't want to talk about caregiving. Maybe she wants to talk about something entirely different. And that, it's really going to be up to her, to figure out, you together can figure out what helps her feel better. She might want an escape from what's going on. And then I would say, make sure that, if her husband has dementia, there are resources. They can be connected with the local Alzheimer's Association office, might be able to provide resources. If she's not aware, and so many caregivers are not aware of the local area agency on aging, they are all over the country. These agencies, they are under a different name in each county or state. They are several agencies, often within a state. So in her area, she can go to elderlocator.gov and put in the zip code and be in touch with her local area agency on aging, and they will come out and do an assessment, and then they can provide all sorts of resources that can be helpful. So that's another way, just sharing, those resources that you're aware of that could be helpful for her. And when you're there, there are a couple things. It's going to depend again on what she needs. Is she getting respite? Is someone able to come in and sit with her husband so that she can get out? If not, that might be something that you provide, but it might be that she wants to spend time with you, so that maybe that you want somebody else to come in and spend time, with her husband. So that's something to think about. And then often we have, we're challenged to how to engage and interact with someone who has dementia. I think it'll be really great for you to learn a little bit about what's going on there, and talk to her and find out how you can at least interact and engage with both of them, so that you're not uncomfortable, so that, they're not uncomfortable. So I think those are some great ways you could support her. And thank you for asking that question. I love that you're thinking of her.
All right. Does anyone have any more questions? Feel free to just raise your hand. Just a couple notes. We will be posting this online. So if you know someone who'd benefit from it, maybe you know someone who wasn't able to join today, should be up on our social media feeds, Facebook and YouTube, sometime within the next week. And we'll also put it on our website as well. And as Theresa mentioned earlier, she sent a ton of resources to share as well. And you can always go to her website, sustainablecaregiving.com. Like I said, there's a ton of great resources on there. So please be sure to check that out as well.
Brian, I can answer a question that I get very frequently.
That'd be great.
Yeah. So often I get it. Like everything we talked about, it's like, how in the world can I fit one more thing into my day? And that's a very valid response to everything that you've heard today. Great. All these self-care activities sound wonderful, but I don't have time for that. And I get that. And that's why we talk about the 5 or 10 or 15-minute blocks of time and your passions. And I mean, learn a new language, seriously, I'm caring for my family member and it's all I can do. So but I guess what's really important to understand here is that, let's say you're someone who loved to travel and you can no longer travel because of caregiving responsibilities. It might help you feel more connected to your passion for travel if you do learn a new language of the favorite country that you either did visit or going to visit. And it can be the 5 minutes a day. Duolingo, and I think there's even a newer app that involves immersion. But 5-10 minutes a day can help you feel like you are, you're growing and you're still connected with your life before caregiving. So these are things with 5 minutes of meditation, stillness. It doesn't have to be meditation, because meditation was traumatic for me when I began and I was caregiving. Opening up your mind and creating space, it just gives an opportunity for those worries to flood in. So if you have 5 minutes just to sit in calmness and stillness, it can be a game changer. Breathing exercises. Do you ever find yourself holding your breath when you're washing dishes? I mean, there's nothing stressful going on, but you're holding your breath. It's because you're dealing with so much overwhelm and stress. So just a minute of breathing exercises a few times throughout the day. you're not holding your breath any longer. So there are ways, all of these self-care activities. I'm not talking about taking an hour to go to the spa or even an hour to go do a run. When I used to run to relieve stress, I just would worry about everything that was happening and the conversation circular, on repeat, come back more stressed than when I left. But when I learned to cultivate and practice mindfulness, then I put a boundary around the worries. I spent my time, just checking out nature, a more mindful run. So the strategies work together, and maybe it's just, a 5-minute walk, but just any way we can incorporate the things that help us feel whole, help us feel more like ourselves into our day in 5-minute, 15-minute blocks. It just helps us stay connected, and it will start to feel better. We'll start to feel stronger, and we'll come out of that place of burnout. And then we'll recognize when we're sliding back into burnout and can just, change things up. And that's where routines come in handy. And the last thing I'm going to say is we create routines, something happens, and we discard the routine and start just juggling the balls as they're tossed to us. But modifying the routine, trying to keep those practices of self-care practices in place, whether we move them or shorten the time. That's how we're going to stay strong through the crisis.
Perfect. Thank you. Yep. Oh, well, let's see. Carly, you have your hand up again. Did you have some additional questions?
I was thinking about the lecture we heard last week on emergency preparedness.
Okay.
It was the Southern California group did that. And one of the things that I know my neighbors really struggled with their father who had dementia is there was no plan set up for emergency evacuation from our hillside when we had a big fire. And that, of course, is very disorienting for anybody with dementia, but it's also disorienting for people with disabilities because you don't know whether you're going to a place that you can get in and out of, where there will be what you need and the rest of it. And, having a family planning meeting around doing where are you going? How are you going to manage food? How are you going to manage the person and make that a family meeting, I think is a really good idea.
That is a great idea. We had to evacuate for hurricane. I think it was Ivan in Florida with Dad. And we fortunately had a plan in place because I was preparing a plan to help other caregivers with a plan, but it still was challenging. So you're so right to have that. We actually had, we had a corner where we had everything put together because hurricane season in Florida, where we could just throw it in the vehicle and take it with us, but at least have a list so that you can gather things, quickly. If it's a fire, you may not have that time. So having a go bag, is really important because you might have medications. There's just certain crucial things that you need to have with you. And then you're so right, Carla, a place that will accommodate you and your needs. It is going to be disorienting, and there's really, the only way we can't avoid that, but we can minimize that, the challenge there by having a plan. I think that's just a really great point. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right, well, don't see any more hands up, so we might go ahead and wrap it up there. I want to thank everyone for joining us again today. Oh, we got one more hand, so we got plenty of time. So I'm going to go to Michael. Michael, go ahead and take yourself off mute.
All right, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Good. I don't have a question, I have an observation, and that is, as one who has, for the last several years, begun to recognize creeping disability and the effects they're having on my life, and to recognize with great gratitude the assistance I'm getting from my wife, and which is going to intensify. One thing it seems to me that would be useful for people rather than say, I'm taking care of Pop or I'm looking after Grandpa, is to identify themselves as a caregiver. That seems to me, and much of what we've heard from Theresa today is how you characterize yourself within a structure of, it's not just, oh yeah, he needs some help and we're going to do this, that, and the other thing. It's putting together how you organize that help and prepare for the upsides and the downsides. It doesn't have all this stuff that we do or is done for us shouldn't happen by accident. It should be done purposely. And I just think that is a way that people should think about when they set out to care for somebody, and as somebody who's a recipient of the care would find useful as well.
Yes, Michael, it's such an important point that you make. And I just, in this last week, there have been 2 instances where a care recipient just didn't want to accept that they needed care, and then a caregiver didn't want to accept that they were they were not a caregiver, but they were in fact caring for their mom. And I think there's a lot of things that prevent us in society from, just embracing that caregiver title and role. We might have an image of what we think a caregiver looks like, and we don't fit that image, or we might not be ready to accept that level of responsibility, or we might not want to accept that our family member in fact needs care. All of those things, happen. It's just common, but it's so true that when we accept and maybe we can come up with a better term than caregiver, but when we accept that title, that role, then we do look for resources. We do find connections to other people who are, who are in that same position, and we get support from that. It's the aging, just needing help and all of that. There's such a stigma attached to all of that in our society that I think it creates the barriers and some of a challenge. But I love that you recognize, that you are receiving care from your wife. You can appreciate, what she's doing for you and show her that appreciation. And it is certainly something to have a conversation with your kids about. And concerned about our family member, and we're a caregiver. We can just be helping out and just with some errands, and we are in a caregiver role. But if that title is triggering for some, then we don't need to use it. But still, those resources, we can help folks connect with those resources. Yeah, great observation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How come you don't have video?
Let me ask you, so I know a lot of folks here, they probably go to a
They don't
local
have-
support group.
Oh,
Oh, I'm sorry. Michael, did you have another question?
No,
Oh, okay, sorry. So a lot of these folks probably go to a local support group for polio survivors where they can talk about issues. And I've heard people ask us or bring up in the past that maybe their caregivers would really benefit from some sort of caregiving support group where they can, talk about issues or share resources or talk about frustrations away from the person they're caregiving for. In your knowledge, is there little support group, caregiving support groups around the country that people can seek out, or how would they go about that?
Yes, so there are support groups, and they can often be hidden, and not intentionally, but hard to find.
Mm-hmm.
You might find that you find a few support groups, but they're not the right fit. Maybe your family member isn't living with dementia, but that's all you can find is a support group for family members, caring for someone who's living with dementia. So I would definitely start by contacting your local area agency on aging, and they can let you know what support groups are in the area. There still may be some that they're not aware of. I think that one thing that came out of the pandemic is we have a lot of virtual, online support groups. And the thing that's nice about these, if you're comfortable with that, with this medium, is that you don't have to leave your home. You don't have to find someone maybe to care for your family member. It's just a lot more convenient. And I know of one in Florida, and she opens it up to anyone. It's wonderful. Linda Burhans. So her support group she does online and in person now. That's something that came out of the pandemic. I think the most important thing here is finding the group is one thing, finding the right fit is another. So finding a group where you feel comfortable, that where you can relate, you know, to the folks who are there. It may be that going to a support group for people who are caring for their parent, you know, isn't what you need. You want to be with other folks who are caring for a spouse. So that's just, those are some considerations. Or if it's, like I said, if it's, you know, with dad had cognitive decline, but he wasn't living with dementia, that wasn't necessarily a place that, you know, I felt like it would be a good fit for me to go to one of those support groups. So absolutely connecting with others. And I will say, if you venting, that helps you vent, it helps you connect with resources. You might, you know, hear about what's happening in the future, which can be helpful. It also might be scary, but it might be a good fit for you. If a support group is not, at least find some other way to vent. And journaling is a great way to process your emotions, get them out, kind of understand what you're going through. It might be calling a sibling, but it may not be. Your friends may not understand what you're going through, and you can often feel worse for sharing something than you did, you know, before you shared. So it's a matter of finding the right fit. A support group is a fantastic idea. It's, yeah, I will say a lot. It can be challenging. So, but just don't give up. Start the process. Yeah.
Okay, great. Let's see. Alice has her hand raised. Alice, go ahead.
For me,
Yep, go ahead.
I do not need caregiving yet from post-polio, but I feel that I probably will. I'm 84. And my daughter would like to do that. I know she would like to be my caregiver. And she has even reserved a room in her house, which she calls my room. However, whenever I go there, or even when she visits me, she is quite demanding and seems angry. It may be that she's feeling the role of possible caregiver too much. I don't know. I don't know why this is, but I don't want to be there. And so I've formed relationships in my neighborhood with some other women, and we sort of care for each other, but I know eventually I'll need more. And I just can't figure out what I'm going to do to make this work with my daughter if she is my caregiver.
Such a valid question and concern. So I think it's really great that you understand the challenge and what you want and what you don't want. And the difficulty is going to be, it's tough to have these conversations. And as you said, you know, you have to figure out, you want to figure out what you will do if it's not going to live with your daughter. She probably will definitely still be involved in care and support for you. So if you think about down the road, if you want to stay where you are, again, the local area agency on aging, I would definitely reach out to them, have someone come in and talk with them about the supports that can help you stay in your place. That's what they're designed for. They're there to help us age in place. So that's 100% what their support is there to offer. So find out what is available to you in that way. I think that's a place to start. I think it's important to have a conversation with your daughter and let her know this is, while you appreciate that this is something she wants to do, it's not something that you want for your future, and then try to figure out what your future will look like. You're sensing some anger from her, some frustration, maybe there is something going on there. Maybe getting to the root of that would be helpful. If she is helping out right now, you know, maybe find ways for other services to provide that help, other resources who can provide the help, whether it's grocery delivery, someone coming in to helping with housekeeping, you know, whatever it might be, to take some of that burden off of her. It's only going to get more challenging, and your relationship is going to be challenged as well. So having these open conversations right now, just being real honest with each other, is extremely important. And you're going to have this free PDF with these strategies. They could be very helpful. You know, she could read these strategies as well and start to understand. You know, what happens is we start to want to control a little bit. Like control is not the right word, but we think, you know, your daughter might think you should be doing certain things at certain times in a certain way. And this is your life. You've lived it on your own very well for this long, and might resent some of that, you know, help. And her understanding that you have the dignity of work is one way, but it's just basically about it's your right to be able to make choices for yourself. So this is something you'll want to work through together, but it does sound like there may be already some resentment starting there, and having a conversation about it, and hopefully she'll be open and honest with you, and you can work out a plan for the future. I think that's gonna help. And I understand it's complicated because there's not an easy answer. Local area agency on aging can really help you look at what your options are. Yeah, I think that would be a great place to start.
Okay. Carla, did you have some additional questions?
No, I had a thought for you.
Sure. Go ahead.
Why doesn't PHI start a group on Zoom for caregivers of people with polio, but initially make it an educational group to learn about polio? I mean, my son thinks he knows so much about it, and why don't I not have to take a nap and all that stuff? And he doesn't know that. He just thinks he does. But I could see Marnie giving a class on Zoom for caregivers of polios.
Yeah,
Family
I think that's a really great idea. I think you know, there are a lot of people out there like you who have family members, who have maybe close friends who help out, who just
Yeah.
don't fully understand you know, the late effects of polio and everything you're going through, and understand that you might need to pace your activities and take breaks during the day, and all those type of issues. So I think that something we will probably maybe look into, and if there's you know, enough demand for it, we can maybe look into starting something like that. So yeah, great idea, and thanks for your comments.
Yeah, and Brian, you mentioned that there's already a support group in place to help folks living with the effects of polio. Well, you might have a splinter group off of that, of caregivers within that group who want to meet at a different time and discuss caregiving challenges.
Yeah, there are so there are probably, you know, a few local post-polio support groups out there that do try to carve some meetings out during the year, one or two maybe every once in a while, to allow caregivers to come and focus on those issues. So if any of our leaders are listening in, you know, that's something you might also look into, because I know it's been much appreciated by the people in those few groups that do it right now. So. All right, I see Dick Nelson has his hand raised. Go ahead.
You hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, you were talking about post-polio groups. I live in the Kansas City area, and we have one that meets every month, the last Friday of the month, and we'll have one this Friday. And we talk for a couple of hours, and just about things going on in our life, different methods, physical therapy, doctors, whatever comes up. And it's very helpful, and we make it work. So I just want to let you know that it can be done.
Yeah, terrific. Thanks for sharing. All right, let's see. Alice has her hand up. Alice, go ahead. Alice, are you there? Okay, she might have had it up from last time and we got to put it down. We are just about out of time here. I want to once again thank Theresa for joining us. It was a great talk. I'm sure we learned a ton, and there's a ton of great resources that were shared today. Great ideas for, as she said, making caregiving more sustainable, making things easier on the caregiver. So we thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.
And thank you everyone for tuning in again today. Wish you a happy holidays and have a great 2024. All right. See you later.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks.